And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Blaring headline, the Wall Street Journal. Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal telling Donald Trump, take responsibility and resign. Even the freaking Wall Street Journal. Now, look, when the National Manufacturers Association comes out and says, invoke the 25th Amendment, the newspaper of the investor class is saying, it's time for you to go. The wealthy are worried. The capitalist owners of our country very concerned that this could get out of hand. Look, they've been fanning these flames for decades. They've been keeping this group of maniacs kind of puffed up. They've been courting them and dog whistle politicking because you want the dog there, but you never want him to bite. You want the fear of the bite to be much worse than actually being bitten. And now we've seen what the lunatic fringe is willing to do. And now you're going to have a reaction, which is why you're seeing these Republicans coming out and saying, I better condemn this. I better say something, or I better not. And one of the new representatives in Congress, this Lauren Boebert, who has been kind of my new follow in Congress because she came in with probably one of the greatest PR campaigns that I've seen. She knew the Capitol Police weren't going to allow her to walk around with a gun holstered. She knew they weren't going to let her take her Glock everywhere in the city of Washington, D.C., and she came with a slick campaign. I mean, I give her credit. I was in awe of how well her videos were. I was going, this is fantastic. She's really good at the propaganda. To steal a George W. Bush frame, man, she is catapulting the propaganda in massive ways. And not because it's just she believes in the ideology of I want to, have my gun and stroke it and keep it close to me all the time. No, it was about the money, man. Because every time you turn around, there was there's a bag. She didn't tweet today. You know what else I didn't get today? I didn't get any fundraising emails from the RNC, from Mitch McConnell, from Mark Meadows, from Donald Trump, Eric Trump, Dumb Jr., Ivanka. The RNC, nobody sent me fundraising emails. No one sent me any emails saying, they're stealing our election, send us cash. Didn't happen. Because, again, I've been saying all along, Trump's push in all of this is about one, keeping people all frenzied so that he can cash in on them. But for the Republican Party as a whole, it was about fundraising, list building, and jockeying for position. And this is where we are. Now, the question is, where are we going to go as a country? Now that we're awake, the nation is on high alert. I had an interesting little back and forth with a Trump supporter today that made me think that maybe it's possible that there's hope. This person said they really, to their core, honestly and truthfully believed that could have never happened with his ilk, with his brethren, with his fellow Trump supporters. He never believed that they could break the law, that they could never go. Now it's ridiculous that this person believed this. It's almost unconscionable that this person could believe this. And incredulously, I was like, did you not see Charlottesville? Have you not seen the acts of violence that have gone on? And the truth is, no, they don't, because they don't consume the kind of media that the rest of us do. That has the tendency to show us this stuff. They truly believed that everyone in that crowd was just like him. Good God-fearing white Christian who pays his taxes and is ticked off because life hasn't turned out the way he was told. He's worked hard his whole life. He's busted his behind, and he's still struggling in his late 50s. He's still worried about being homeless with children in the house. Because if he loses his job, it's not long before the curb. So this guy is distraught in that what he had believed, that Trump was, the savior. He was going to make things better. Hasn't. And this guy admitted this. And maybe this is that moment. Maybe it is. Maybe there's the epiphany moment here. Maybe if there can be anything good out of the tragedy that took 5 lives yesterday, if there's anything good that can come out of the fact that this is the first time we've had bloodshed in the transfer of power in this country, maybe something good could come out of it. Maybe the epiphany of guys like this, maybe it'll be worth it. I know that's a huge thing to say, but maybe it will wake some people awake, because when you drill down to what he was talking about, he expected the Black Lives Matter people to tear things up because, well, they're animals and scumbags. Could not look in the mirror and see that animal and scumbag. Could not see that the people that he's been organizing with and doing Facebook groups with and sending angry memes with could possibly break the law and shed blood. And when I asked him, I go, have you not read the rhetoric? And he was like, he dismissed it as, well, it's just blowing off steam. Everyone talks like that. No, everyone doesn't talk like that. Everyone doesn't say that if a policeman is going to take my gun away, I'm going to stack up bodies. That's not the talk of sane, rational people. That's not the talk of good citizens. Now, I didn't get him to go as far as agreeing with the fact that these people saw themselves as revolutionaries and 1776 patriots, because he views himself in that vein. I'm fighting for my country and I want fair elections. Because he even spewed the same kind of totally debunked the conspiracy theories out that Trump has been spewing. In fact, on the day of it, that Trump spewed out. Still clinging to that, but distraught over the fact that the people that he thought he was shoulder to shoulder with, the people that he thought he knew, they were capable of this. And even he admitted that Trump has to go. And I'm not someone who jumps on bandwagons easily. When there was the call for him to resign, back a couple of years ago, everyone was saying, "Oh no, he's going to resign." I'm like, no, he's not. He's not going anywhere. He's going to fight to the death, no matter what, which is what he has done. When people were calling for impeachment, I'm going, well, it's going to be an exercise in futility. He's not going to be removed. We should be organizing in other ways. And look, it's exactly what it was. Because I said at the time, the Republicans didn't have the spine or the backbone to stand up to him. Now, was it the right thing to do to impeach him? Absolutely. Once the phone call, the transcripts came out, absolutely, without question, in my view, that was not a perfect call. I guess it was. It was a perfect call to impeach him over. The call to the Georgia Secretary of State, a perfect call to impeach him over. And now this. A perfect moment to regain our soul, to tell the guy that I talked to today that it's not okay to spew the kind of rhetoric that has been lighting up our airwaves for the last 40 years. It's not okay to do these things and to not be held accountable. And even if it's in the last minute, even if he is impeached and removed from office on January 20th at 9 a.m., I think it has to be done. And it's interesting to me that the cowards in this administration are resigning and leaving their offices instead of doing what they should be doing, is invoking the 25th Amendment and enforcing him out the door immediately. That should happen. And if that isn't going to happen, I understand there are articles of impeachment. I'm hoping that happens. At this moment, Everything, in my view, is about finding our soul. Everything right now is about finding who we are moving forward. And yes, I know we're in the middle of a raging pandemic, but understand nothing is being done right now anyway. And maybe with Mike Pence at the helm, maybe in these last 2 weeks, we get somebody who's a little more focused on dealing with the pandemic. Not a Mike Pence fan by any stretch of the imagination, but maybe, just maybe, he'll be a little more focused on doing his job and a little less focused on, well, causing mayhem, on being the victim. Reality, Trump lost. And in his little spiel today, where he now, after all that he's done over the last five and a half years, since he came down the elevator, all of the incendiary comments and all of the smack the crap out of him, throw him out with no coat. After all of that, now calling for a smooth transition of power. And I would argue that what we got today was the closest thing you're going to get to a concession speech, but I'll take it as long as he goes. And that's the reality in this. He has to go. There has to be consequences. The only way we save our soul for our children is to let them know that you do something wrong, there are consequences. There are consequences for your actions, and no matter who you are, all the way up to the President of these United States, you will be held accountable. And as a parent, I cannot imagine allowing my kids to get away with this. And as a country, I can't imagine us allowing any leader to get away with it. The message here is clear. He must be held accountable. That's it. Because that message isn't going to filter down to the people who, in the aftermath of bloodshed, I mean, this is the incredible part of this. In the aftermath of the bloodshed, you had, people calling for, much bigger events. There's still organizing going on around this. And, I look at what I'm considering Trump's concession speech. He finished it. And this is the amazing part. He finishes it with, our journey is just beginning. Now, clearly, he's on the way out the door. Clearly, he's not going to be president because guess what? Congress did its job. They have certified a new president, and that new president is Joe Biden. And on January 20th at noon, Joe Biden will put his hand on the Bible and he will swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of these United States. And he will, at 12:01 on January 20th, he will be the president of the United States. And he will be the one that moves us out of this horrible moment in our history. But the fact that he's still stoking the fire in what was supposed to be a calming moment is just another example of again, how they stoke these fires. Because understand, what the rabid right wing hears, they didn't hear any of the concession, didn't hear anything about the smooth transition of power, didn't hear anything about how he denounces and everyone should be held accountable who broke the law. They didn't hear any of that. They heard, our journey's just begun. There's more to come. It's not over. Which is why he has to be held accountable and ousted from office. For me, it is that simple. Now, again, I've been in this weird spot because I've been, for the last, several hours just consumed by social media and checking these stories on, one idiot or another posting, videos of themselves, saying dumb stuff. And there's tons of it out there. And the thing is there are people who are consuming this. I look at this one guy who's, it's another crazy moment. This guy is the Otero County Commissioner and the head of Cowboys for Trump. His name's Couy Griffin. Big old hat, giant hat, big old, fake teeth grin. Used car salesman. Cowboy for Trump, calling for blood to run from the buildings, saying if you think this is bad, just wait. And the reality is if they aren't met with some bit of force, we have a problem. Now, good thing, I guess here's a positive thing. The acting attorney general, Jeffrey Rosen, he has vowed that anyone who will be seen on the videos, anyone who broke into our Capitol, any of the seditious acts that happened will be punished. He said they're going to face the full consequences of their actions under the law. They could face up to 10 years in prison for what they call injury of federal property. I guess that is that really a crime? Injury? It doesn't quite seem to rise to the level that I'm thinking of what they did. They tried to stop our elections. They tried to stop a couple hundred years of the peaceful transition of power. They tried to usurp our democracy and impose their will because they were angry. That has got to grab us by the heart and by the throats and make us say, we're better than this. But I got to tell you, as of right now, we're not. This is who we are as a country. This is what the world sees. And some of the responses from around the world, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. They were expecting it. And I had someone say to me, how did you expect it? I go, I've been paying attention. The one thing that is surprising to me is that this didn't happen sooner. That more of this stuff hasn't happened. I mean, they've had people take over capitals, and as I've said, that was a trained, dressed exercise. This was part of their practice so that they could have their little Super Bowl yesterday. And they learned, because they're white faces, nobody was going to do anything to them. I'll tell you right now, just like Joe Biden said, if those were black faces, it'd have been handled a whole lot differently. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1916. That was the day of the Youngstown Massacre. It was World War I, and the demand for steel in war production had skyrocketed. Steelworkers at Republic Steel went on strike in late December of 1915 to demand a wage hike and overtime pay. They also wanted a decrease in the work week to 48 hours and improved safety conditions. Workers at the Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company soon followed. The number of striking workers grew to well over 13,000. It was on this day that some 6,000 strikers, their wives, and children gathered at the bridge across from the gate at the Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company, intent on stopping scabs from entering the plant. Guards at the mill left company property to confront the strikers at the bridge and began attacking them with tear gas and live ammunition. The upheaval would soon spread to the business district of East Youngstown. By the time the dust settled the next morning, several blocks of businesses were destroyed. While at least 3 strikers lay dead, another 30 were seriously injured at the hands of the company-hired guns. National Guard troops were called in to quell the disturbances. A grand jury convened to determine the cause of the disorder. They ruled that over 100 companies were in violation of the state's Valentine Antitrust Act and conspired to keep wages down in the steel industry. They held the actions of the Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company primarily responsible for the death and destruction that reigned over the city. The strikers won an immediate 10% wage increase and better company housing. But the courts dismissed the grand jury's findings. It would be decades before the industry was finally able to unionize. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I've been saying, the reality is in my view, Trump's got to go immediately. If he's not going to resign, if the cabinet and Mike Pence are cowards and refuse to invoke the 25th Amendment, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats have to move forward on impeachment. And then we have to see if there are any statesmen, any patriots in the Senate to step forward and remove him. Now, I find it interesting that Colin Powell today said that he wasn't interested in any of that. He said, the 13 days will pass. Nothing will happen in that 13-day period. Let's let it play out. I don't agree. And here to share some thoughts on the events of yesterday and maybe where we go with this, I've asked Kevin Gannon to come talk with us. Kevin's the professor of history at Grandview University, also the director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning there. Kevin, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, you're welcome, Rick. Glad to be here with you.
So do you share the view of Colin Powell that we just go, hey, it's only 13 days. Let it play out?
No, I don't. What that quote really made me think of was the anonymous Republican quote right after the election when Trump had sunk into denialism already. And there was that quote, something along the lines of, well, what's the harm in letting him indulge this, right? I mean, to me, those are of a piece. A lot can happen in a very short time, as we saw yesterday. 13 days. A lot could happen in 13 days, and that may sound overwrought to some, but I think that where we are now and what we've seen, we shouldn't rule out any possibilities.
No, I'm right there. And, I agree with Democratic Senator Chris Coons, who said, look, in the last days, we could end up in some kind of conflict. I mean, he's been flirting with Iran for quite some time. Who knows where this ends?
Mm-hmm. And what we've seen, too, given the enormous centralization of executive power, really throughout the Cold War, but how it's intensified under Trump and how so much of this authority has been consolidated under, acting and political appointees, and where the bonds of accountability have really been attenuated, if not broken completely. I'm very worried about 13 days, given all of those other things in place.
Yeah.
Because a lot can happen, and yeah, you have someone who's clearly spiraling into this sort of narcissistic pit. Anybody who says they can predict what Trump is going to do is lying, because I don't even think Trump can predict what he's going to do from hour to hour.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. But here's my other point on this: is as a parent, I can't let my kids get away with something this large. On my view, this is sedition. He was calling for an overthrow of our government. This has to be responded to. There have to be consequences. Even if he's impeached or removed on January 20th at 11:59 a.m., he still has to go.
Absolutely. I mean, and look at where we're at and look at the events of yesterday. I mean, as plenty of folks pointed out, both in the House and Senate chambers, as well as out in kind of the public discourse, the last time the Capitol was breached like this was the British Army when they burned Washington, D.C. In August of 1814. But I think, as I looked at the pictures and the footage that was coming out as I was watching this unfold, you had the very, I think, shocking image of the one protester carrying the huge Confederate battle flag through Statuary Hall in the Capitol. And, it occurred to me that is the furthest the Confederate battle flag got into Washington, D.C., right? Robert Edward Lee could not get his army and that battle flag into Washington, D.C. But yesterday we saw that. And I think it's just so richly evocative of what that moment is. And we got here, make no mistake, we got here because of the refusal, the cowardice, the unwillingness to confront what's really happening politically and culturally in our society and hold people accountable. And, ironically, it's the Republicans, right? The party of so-called individual responsibility, who basically have given Trump and executive authority in general a blank check. We are where we are because there have been no consequences up to this point. In your metaphor, being a parent, this is an apt metaphor, right? If you never put boundaries around acceptable behavior, you can't be surprised when your children act out in ways like this. And so what we're seeing is that thing just scaled up to epic proportions. Trump has been entitled his entire life. He's been consequence-free his entire life. And now he's basically worshipped and enabled by this clutch of, political supporters who think that they can ride this Trump aura and, and satisfy their own ambition. And here's where we got yesterday. There was a direct line there. And so if there isn't even a movement towards accountability now, this will happen again, and it will be sooner rather than later.
No, and that's my great fear in this is the Republican Party for decades has been courting this right wing militia mentality, the dog whistle politic of the past. That Republicans were always happy to dance with the devil as long as it was a little off out of screen.
Right.
Trump was the first one who fully embraced it and out in public said it out loud, which emboldened these people to come forward. And now you can't have a Republican Party say, "Oh, no, we're sorry. We condemn this now." No, I'm not going there. These people have to go. Period.
Yeah. At the beginning of the Mexican Revolution in the early 20th century, the conservative General Porfirio Diaz remarked about Francisco Madero, the first revolutionary president, and that what became a very tumultuous period. He said, "Madero has unleashed a tiger. Let's see if he can ride it." And, since Reagan, especially, the Republicans have been riding the tiger. And what they're learning now is it's not so much fun when the tiger wants to ride you.
No, exactly. And I would go back to Nixon with the Southern strategy. I mean, this is who the question of is this who we are? Came up a lot yesterday. And the reality is, yes, this is exactly who we are. And this is who Putin and every one of our enemies knows who we are. So when they I don't even want to, I hate keep saying meddling in our elections, but when they attack us the way they did in 2016, this is what they knew that we didn't.
Right. And, if you look at some of the critiques, look at what the USSR was saying about the U.S. during the Cold War period. One of the most effective propaganda techniques the Soviets had was say, how could the U.S. be a beacon of democracy? Look at how they treat black people. And a lot of early white momentum towards civil rights wasn't necessarily out of some altruistic sense of racial equality, but we don't want the Russians to score points against us, right? This is who we are. And there is a direct line from Lee Atwater to George Wallace, to Richard Nixon, to Ronald Reagan, to Donald Trump. It is clear, it is consistent. And for the most part, even if some folks in that side have been, genteel about it or smooth or suave enough, they have not been afraid to admit it, even if it has been with a wink and a nudge.
Yeah, I find as a labor person, I find some interest in the fact that the National Association of Manufacturers yesterday called for Trump or called for the 25th Amendment. Today, the newspaper of the investor class, the Wall Street Journal, says that he has to resign. I find it interesting that the instruments of our capitalist class, our corporate titans, are now calling for him to go when they're really the reason the rise of this right-wing insanity has gone on over the last 100 years, from the citizens' alliances of the turn of the century all the way through these T-twit idiots that we saw a couple of years ago to now these Confederate flag-waving morons that I'm stuck with. They're responsible for this, so they don't get any credit, in my view, for going, "Oh, now we want him to go."
Well, one could say that Trump has ceased to be useful, or at least better, the risk of being associated with him outweighs the rewards that used to be there. And so I think we need to look at statements like that from NAM, for example, and the Wall Street Journal. This isn't some repudiation, some come to Jesus moment where they realize the error of their ways. This is cold political calculation, as the rats race one another off the sinking ship. And that's how I see, these grudging admissions of, any sort of second thoughts. It's not so much second thoughts about the core ideology so much as it is that the vehicle that they've been using for the last 4 years is now out of gas.
Yeah, and look, they knew he was going anyway. There was no chance. They just wanted, as a friend of mine reminded me, they were just trying to ride the wave until they get the money that's coming from the Defense Production Act. That's really what the NAM wants, is that money that's coming from that. But they got credit for it, and that's what's amazing to me, that we have such limited historical knowledge or interest in knowing what these groups have done over the years.
And the bar has been set so low now, too. And so when we think historically about the long-term damage that's done by this era, if you look at the asymmetry, right, people of color are held to impossible standards of integrity and organization when it comes to public demonstrations for things like Black Lives Matter in the wake of the George Floyd murder. one person looks sideways at a law enforcement officer and the streets are full of tear gas. But now we have, the National Association of Manufacturers or the Wall Street Journal, which have been actively encouraging everything that we've been seeing for the last 4 years. We have, Republicans like Mitt Romney who, are now trying to claim the mantle of statesmanship for doing literally the bare minimum of a citizen's job or of a public representative's job, right? And so now we have this enormous asymmetry where, the Wall Street Journal people will say, oh, they finally have weighed in on the side of good. And all that does is it continues to enhance their platform, enhance their megaphone, and allows them to do further damage. It's the okie doke. And we fall for it again and again and again. And it's just absolutely maddening.
Now, I had a conversation today with someone who said he couldn't believe it. And your assessment of we treat black people much differently, and Joe Biden's assessment as well. If those were black faces today, it'd have been handled much differently. But this person today could not fathom the fact that people that looked like him, that he knew, that he had organized with, would do such a thing. He was distraught, and I guess that's a good thing. It shows something of a conscience inside his ears. Is there a hope going forward that maybe there are more of him, or do you see this going completely the wrong way, as I fear?
So this is the $1 million question, right? This is what I've been wrestling with, and I think a lot of us have been wrestling with. Those of us who are working for progressive causes, those of us who support workers' rights and unions, those of us who support, social solidarity and an egalitarian society and a just society. Where are we and what happens now? Because we've seen, right, it's been laid bare what we're up against. Our society is deeply and grievously wounded. The edges are raw. And so the question is, does it get worse from here? And so maybe like Gramsci said, right? Pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. And I think I still fall on the optimism of the will side. There comes a point when the fever starts to break. Is that going to happen universally right now? No, but I think that for some, the fever has broken. Mitch McConnell is no hero, but I would never have bet that he would have said the words that he did on the Senate floor yesterday, right? And so whether it's cold calculation or whatever, we do start to see shifts. We do start to see the cracks in the foundation. We do start to see the fever break a little bit. And this person that you're talking about, this example, I think is a good one of that. It's like, yeah, you're late to the party, but when this realization sets in, and when white folks like us in particular say, yeah, these are people like us, these are our people doing these things, and we need to hold each other accountable like that. When you have enough momentum behind that, when you have enough individuals who are arriving at that decision, I think the collective impact of that can be important and can be powerful. And I hope, and I feel like there are moments, associated with where we are now, where maybe we are at one of those hinge moments. I hope so. And I hope that whatever opportunity lies in this does not get squandered as it seems to have been done so many times in the past.
Yeah, my fear is though that we move on from this moment. Let's just put it behind us and let's move forward. That's my fear of the rhetoric going forward, and I hope that doesn't happen. But on the McConnell front, I give him no credit for anything. McConnell is a self-preservationist. That's what it was about. And if anybody, and I tell my Trump supporters this all the time, if anybody beat Donald Trump, it was Mitch McConnell. Because they didn't pass a stimulus over the summer. Had they done that, I don't see a path for him to lose the way he did. But that's a whole nother conversation for another day. I guess, last line of questioning I want to get into, because again, this is that going forward kind of moment. What we're seeing, the rise of Trump is, in my view, the fact that there are so many people who, like me, grew up believing that if you worked hard, you played by the rules, you were going to get ahead. And you got all these people there who are, like me. I look in the mirror and I saw them saying, you know what, I've worked hard, I've busted my butt all these years, and I'm still struggling. The economy has decimated our ability to move ahead, and we've done nothing. And the Democrats have done really nothing to help either. Is this not an opportunity to say, this is how we start sharing the economy and start taking maybe a much higher tax rate, maybe let labor organize again, maybe do some of those things that built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization?
Absolutely. And that's the only way that you begin to address what we're seeing today on a fundamental sense, right? And I agree with you. I think the greatest danger we have now is from, however well intended, this rhetoric of let's put this in the past, let's move on. Our political class is very conflict averse. But look at what happened at the end of Reconstruction. Reconstruction was ended by political compromise in a disputed election in 1877. And African Americans were basically, metaphorically and literally, sold down the river as a result. As one Northern newspaper editor put it, the plain truth is, he said, the North got tired of the Negro. And look what happened in the aftermath of that. The resurgence of the Klan, Jim Crow, and what we've been fighting ever since. And so we as a society, we have to hold our leaders accountable to resist that temptation, because it is so seductive to try to normalize things. We are not in normal times, and we will not be in normal times unless we recognize the fact that we have to put in some sort of accountability and guardrails, or else we're going to keep careening off the tracks. And the best guardrails are to help build a more just and equitable society. The late 19th century, Tom Watson, the white Georgian populist, before he turned into a vicious racist, used to address both white and black workers in rural Georgia, white and black sharecroppers. And he said, you are being kept apart by the plutocrats so that you may be fleeced of your earnings separately. And that's the playbook, right? That's Lee Atwater's Southern strategy. That's Reaganism. That's neoliberalism. That's where we are. And so to realize that as working people, as citizens who are the productive backbone of the country, we need to realize that our class interests should overcome racial divisions. And right now it's the opposite. Race trumps, pardon the pun, class.
Right.
And until we're able, and this is a lot of work that white people like me have to do, right? But until we're able to overcome that, true class solidarity is going to continue to founder. And we're going to kind of circle the drain. But this is a hinge moment where I think we have the realization of what that racial inequity has wrought and the effects that it's had and the corrosive effects that it's had. Seize the momentum of that to build the society that we deserve.
Yeah, absolutely right. But again, I go back to the quote from the old railroad magnate Jay Gould: "I can easily pay half the working class to murder the other half." Sadly,
Right.
This is what we saw yesterday and what we're seeing today, and it comes back to our massive inequality problem in this country. But Kevin, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Fantastic talking to you. I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts with us down the road.
Anytime, Rick. And again, great to be with you tonight. And thanks for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Kevin Gannon, professor of history there at Grandview University, also the director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day that President Jimmy Carter signed into law the Chrysler Corporation Loan Guarantee Act. The act allowed the federal government to guarantee up to $1.5 billion in loans to aid the failing Chrysler Corporation. The car giant had to find private financing for the loans, but had the promise of the federal government's backing. In the late 1970s, high gasoline prices had hit the domestic automobile industry hard. Japanese and European car manufacturers were increasing their market share by producing smaller, more fuel-efficient cars. By 1979, Chrysler's annual losses had soared toward $1 billion. In his remarks on the signing of the law, President Carter said, "It's important to have Chrysler preserved as a viable, competitive entity, not only to protect the jobs involved, but to protect the competitive nature of the American automobile manufacturing industry in its competition with foreign suppliers, and in the provision of good products at a competitive price for the American consumer." Officials from both Chrysler and the United Auto Workers helped to hammer out the deal in Washington. The loans helped save Chrysler, and the company did pay the money back. In 2008, the auto industry companies were once again helped by a federal bailout. Many working people have noted that the federal government seems much more quick to help corporations who fall on hard times rather than regular people. Folk musician Arlo Guthrie wrote a song capturing this very idea.
I am changing my name to Chrysler. I am going down to Washington, D.C. I will tell some power broker what they did. Iacocca will be perfectly acceptable to me. I am changing
Like what
my
you hear?
name
Check out more
to
at
Chrysler.
neighborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So another one of these disgraceful moments from yesterday. There was a memorial placard for the late Congressman John Lewis in the Capitol that was destroyed, and you just had to know that they were going to destroy that. I mean, it's just, I guess again, it speaks volumes to what happened yesterday and what we've allowed to happen in this country. And I go back to. These people came armed to the teeth, and there's that famous picture of the Capitol Police, pointing guns at a door that they've barricaded. And my first thought was, I'll bet you they're outgunned. I'll bet you the people on the other side of the door have much bigger guns, and that should be a frightful moment. But here to share some thoughts on, yesterday's events, also on the state of Ohio going to, I guess I just got to shoot you laws. I've asked Ben Jackson to come talk with us. Ben is a gun sanity activist and good friend of the program. Ben, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, really glad to be back here. I wish it was a better time in the world to be talking to you, but I'm glad to be with you.
I keep going, in the next couple of months, things are going to get back to boring and normal, and then we'll have, productive conversations about how to make things better instead of cleaning up the mess that happened yesterday. So let's start right there. What'd you think of yesterday's event?
It is shocking to me. I mean, it's nearly 30 years ago. I was in a military entrance processing station in Boston, and I raised my hand and I swore an oath to protect and defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And it is the same oath that every member of Congress, every elected official at the federal level swears. And I don't see anybody living up to that oath right now. I mean, we watched the President of the United States plan and enable a terrorist attack on the seat of power in this country. And that's what it was. It was a terrorist attack on the seat of power in America, planned by the President of the United States. And he is still in power today. And that is maybe the most disgusting part of all of this, is that he has faced no consequences. The biggest consequences he had was he was banned from Twitter for 12 hours. And, to be fair for him, that probably hurt a lot. But it didn't hurt as much as the 4 people who are dead, as the Capitol Police officer who's on life support, as the families that are experiencing this, and as the reputation of the United States as the shining beacon of democracy in the world has taken that is probably irreparable damage at this point because of the failures that led to this and the failures that continue to enable it.
Yeah, sadly, that 5th person has passed.
I had not read that yet.
No, I mean, and again, it's a horrible tragedy all the way around. But here's the thing, you were shocked. I've heard that response from people. I was not. I woke up yesterday morning thinking to myself, how much blood will be shed in our streets. I could not believe that they were able to breach the Capitol. To me, this reeks of an inside job. But I fully expected what happened yesterday. And I actually expected worse, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I will say I'm not shocked that it happened. I think we all knew that it was going to happen. What's shocking about it is that it wasn't stopped, like you said. That what should be the most secure building in the country, somebody was able to break in a window and get in. Right, like that's a thing that shouldn't happen. And that if that crowd looked different, they would have been shot trying to get into the building. But there was just nobody there. And we knew that was like, I'm an idiot and I knew that was going to happen. Right. And these people should have known that this was going to happen and should have stopped it. But beyond that, what's shocking to me is that he's still in power, that they haven't taken away the keys, that they haven't said, you don't the United States doesn't negotiate with terrorists, right? You don't get to negotiate your way out of here. You don't get to sit around for 13 days and pretend that you're still the president. You are a terrorist, and we are going to treat you accordingly. And we're not doing it. We're trying to decide, oh, do we invoke the 25th Amendment, or do we impeach him, or do we be really nice about it? No, we kick his ass out yesterday as this is happening, and we're done with it. We don't allow it to happen. But we do.
Yeah,
we
no,
do.
and
We allow it to happen.
this is the sad part of this. Now, the thing that gets me is, for me, this was predictable. The only thing that is shocking to me is something like this or worse hasn't happened already.
Right.
With all of the stoking of the fire and all of the dog whistle, not even dog whistle politics, the out and out, calls to violence. It's shocking to me that it hasn't happened more and sooner. But it comes back to this division in our country over guns. I know people who everything, nothing else in their life matters, nothing else politically matters, but this fetish of their gun. And I want to be clear, there's nobody that I know who's talking about coming to anyone's house and taking their guns, but they truly believe that there's going to be if the Democrats take power, there's going to be an army of people coming to take their guns. And this one issue, I believe, is what really brought us to this moment.
Yeah, well, there are a cadre of people who are going to believe the thing that justifies their worldview, right? And so they're going to find out in 13 days, when Democrats have united control of the executive and the legislature, when there will be gun violence prevention legislation passed, and they still have their guns, that it's going to be fine. But they're going to continue to believe this. They're going to continue to believe that myth because it justifies their worldview. And if their worldview is proven wrong, they have to confront all of these other things. And yes, the gun violence problem is a real problem. And yes, it will be addressed by this next government. This is something that the Congress has committed to, that the incoming president has committed to. But it's not going to be we're coming to your door and we're stealing your guns. There are some guns that people won't be allowed to have, and there are some people that won't be allowed to have guns. And that's it. And that's what almost everybody wants. And if you look at polling of gun owners, they believe this. Republicans believe this. Democrats believe this. But there is this really intense cadre of people
The gun manufacturers.
The gun manufacturers who are fed this information, these lies, this misinformation by the NRA, and the NRA lies to them consistently about this because that's where their money is. And they believe it because that's what they see, and that's what they're fed, and that's what they're told. But the reality is not going to be that. And we're not going to convince those people. There's no way to convince those people except for the handful who will see, like, okay, the next 2 years, it's all Democrats, and they still have their guns at the end of it, right? With the exception of the small number of people who shouldn't have guns.
And those people we should start with all of the criminals who invaded our nation's capital.
Yeah, well, I do want to point that out, that one of these guys is a guy who goes by the nickname of Big O, and he runs a quote-unquote gun rights group in Arkansas. And he, on video, committed the felony, not only of, the sedition and taking over the capital of the United States, he stole mail tampering from the desk of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, put it on video, wrote her a note, and that made him a felon. And he's going to lose his gun rights. And I think that's really poetic justice. And yeah, we start with all these terrorists. We don't let terrorists have guns in America.
Yeah, and we don't let them go on we put them on the no-fly list as well.
Right, they're no flies, they're nothing. But we have two new members of Congress in Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, who made a big deal about taking their guns to Congress. And I just want to say, when the terrorists breached Congress, I don't see any pictures of Lauren Boebert with her gun next to the cops. I don't see Marjorie Taylor Greene with her AR-15 shooting down the terrorists. They were hiding under their desks with everybody else. It's a myth. It is a show. It is cowardice. It is disgusting, and it needs to stop.
I'm glad you brought up Lauren Boebert, because I started with her today. She, oddly enough, she didn't tweet anything out today. Nope. Calls of "this is 1776." No, I'm going with my big gun. No shiny videos of her being this uber patriot. None of that. It was kind of like silence.
Yeah. Because she knows, they all know they did this. They did this. And they are traitors. They are enablers of treason. They enabled this attack on our nation. And they're trying to hold on to their offices. They're trying to allow to be maintaining their seat. They're trying to keep committee assignments. They're trying to have some degree of power. They're trying to let the whole world forget that they enabled a terrorist attack on our nation. And they're going to be real quiet for a little while, but we know, and we're not going to let them forget. We're not going to let anybody forget about them.
Yeah. Now, for me, the gun issue. Look, I want law-abiding citizens to have their guns, and if they want to go shoot targets or go hunting and do it, great. You want to defend your home, great. I have a problem in public of people, having guns everywhere. In fact, I was in a restaurant once where a guy dropped it. It fell out of whatever he was holding, hit the ground,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and my family's there.
Right.
This is one of those things where you go, this kind of irresponsibility has to be treated as such. But more importantly, I grew up at a time where little boys fought. I've always said that the worst thing that ever happened to this country is when we stop letting little boys beat each other up, because they figure out how to deal with each other and then be good citizens. We're now in this moment where it's no longer fisticuffs. It's I'm pulling out my gun and I got to shoot you. I'm going to start a fight with you. You're going to hit me back, and I'm afraid for my life. Now I got to shoot you because of these laws, like just passed in Ohio. These idiotic stand your ground laws.
Mm-hmm. And, those laws really ought to be called get away with murder laws. They have nothing to do with standing your ground. We already have laws all over the country that provide a justifiable homicide defense. If somebody is in legitimate danger of losing your life, you are allowed in every part of this country to defend yourself, including using deadly force if that is what is required to save your own life or the lives of your family. That exists in every part of this country. Stand your ground laws are racist. They create crime. They are used against black people. What they do is they create the presumption when the person invokes them that in fact they were defending themselves and the other party is guilty. And so from a prosecutorial standpoint, once you invoke the stand your ground defense, it is the prosecution's duty to prove that you are lying, as opposed to prove that you are telling the truth, right? And so what that means is that the victim of this shooting, who is not there to testify and tell their side of the story, is silenced in the prosecution, in the criminal justice system. And when we see already the racial justice problems that exist in the criminal justice system, that is magnified dramatically in the stand your ground law. So there are in the last 2 years, there have been 4 studies that have come out that have shown in places where stand your ground laws have been enacted, violent crime increases. There is a correlation between violent crime and homicide, and gun homicide in particular, and stand your ground laws. That's just data, that's truth, that's real, it's not manipulated, it's numbers. And the reason is people feel like they can then just pull their gun when they feel threatened. They can carry their guns, they can protect themselves. And this myth, and it is a myth, of defensive gun use is exploding, right? When you look at the idea of defensive gun use, there are these wild ranging numbers from 400,000 times to 2.5 million times that people use their gun to defend themselves. And when you have a number that's ranged that widely, it's a lie. And the reason that it is a lie is because it is self-reported. People who say they felt threatened pulled their gun. And that could be everything from somebody breaking down their house, breaking down their door with an AR-15, which doesn't happen, to that black couple I saw across the street scared me and I pulled the gun to chase them off, right? That is not a defensive gun use.
Or the people in St. Louis who just thought, people were walking by their house, they better go out there with their guns.
Exactly. And under this Ohio law, if they had shot somebody, they probably would have gotten away with it. They probably would have not been convicted because they would have feared, they said they feared legitimately for their lives. Now, nobody was on their property. Nobody was threatening them. Nobody was doing anything but walking past them. And yet they still feared for their lives. And we are a nation that is afraid, and we are a nation that is armed, and we have a gun industry that is stoking that fear. And that is going to get a lot of people killed because of these stupid stand your ground laws.
Yeah, I mean, there's that story that I bring up of, evidently some woman was parked in a handicap spot, and some guy thought it was his responsibility to police that handicap spot instead of just calling the cops and going, hey, there's some woman in that spot. You might want to check into it. He was, just berating her, I guess. And her husband came out and said, hey, what are you doing? Pushed him out of the way. The guy shot him.
Yep.
Because, hey, he pushed me. I was afraid for my life. And it's my position now is this where we're going? Do I now have to carry a gun to where anybody who says a cross word to me, I got to shoot them first because they may shoot me?
Well, let me ask you this, Rick. If you went to your doctor and the doctor said, Rick, I've got bad news. You have cancer, but I've got good news. We're going to give you more cancer to treat it. What would you say to that doctor? Because that's what we're talking here, right? Like, that's what this is. The commonality in all of these things is the gun, and you don't treat gun violence with guns, right? You just don't. It's a completely illogical argument that the other side makes all of the time, and they make it to sell more guns.
And ultimately, sadly, and I hate to say it this way, but that's what it really has all come down to. It's about the money. Because when you talk to these people who, and I know people who have arsenals, they've got hundreds of guns and tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition because they're planning for the zombie apocalypse or, what happened yesterday. They really truly have internalized that, there's somebody coming for them. And I don't know how you get through the day being that fearful that you need to cling to this gun to make you feel safe. And I guess I'm grateful that I don't know what that feels like, but I can't imagine the paranoia and the kind of mental strain that comes along with that belief structure.
Yeah, you know what I cling to is a deadbolt. Like, I lock my door. I don't do the things that are going to get me into those situations. But at the end of the day, I also cling to the idea, and I believe this, I truly believe this, that almost all of us are good people, right? That almost all of us are never going to experience violent crime. And all of us who do experience violent crime, virtually every single one of us, none of us are qualified to shoot our way out of it, right? Even if you look at police, and this is a true thing about police, they are heavily trained to use their guns, and in the best situations where they get into a firefight and the suspect is less than 10 yards away and they're not shooting back, they miss 60% of the time, right? In the worst situations where they're trying to take cover and shooting back and whatever, they hit less than 20% of the time. And that means that you're not going to shoot your way out of this. You're going to shoot other people who aren't involved in it in any kind of way, right?
That's
this
what
is
I've
what
said.
This gets to.
I've said that all the time. Two idiots are going to be shooting at each other, and they're probably going to both hit me. That's just how my luck goes. But the thing is we've got to push back against this, and I'm hoping that some sanity comes out of the next administration because we've got a lot to clean up. But Ben, I appreciate the time. As always, fantastic talking with you. I hope you'll come back and share some more with us in the new year.
Anytime, my friend. Thanks for what you do.
Good stuff. Our good friend Ben Jackson. It's that simple. And my fear is that two idiots shoot each other, and it's me who ends up getting shot. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. Events on this day began what is known as Semana Tragica, or Tragic Week in Argentina. Labor unrest had been mounting in Buenos Aires. On this day, police killed 4 workers who were striking for better wages, hours, and conditions at the British-owned Vesna Ironworks plant. The workers were demanding an 8-hour workday. The following day, workers on the waterfront declared a strike. Ships came to a halt. The following day, a funeral march for the killed ironworkers turned violent. Angry marchers burned a car and attacked a tram station. The police fired on the procession, wounding and killing some of the demonstrators. Anarchists and workers took to the streets, and within 2 days, tens of thousands of workers had joined the general strike. Newspapers, hotels, bars, and even telephone lines ceased operating. Railroad workers called for a sympathy strike. The Argentinian Federal Police, the Argentinian Army, the Argentinian Marine Corps, and the Argentinian Navy cracked down brutally on the strikers, targeting anarchists and labor leaders. The anti-Semitic Argentine Patriotic League blamed the unrest on Jewish-Russian Bolsheviks. They conducted a violent pogrom in the Jewish neighborhood of Once. Jewish residents were dragged out of their homes, beaten, and in some cases shot. By the end of the bloody week, the police and military had killed at least 100 protesters, with some estimates as high as 700. Thousands of workers were beaten, thousands of workers were wounded. and more than 55,000 were imprisoned. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
The rich are different from you and me. For one thing, they're rich. Among the super rich, though, there tends to be a peculiar sense that their net worth is a testament to their true worthiness. Thus, they seem to cling desperately to the very idea of being extremely wealthy. This leads to one specific difference between them and us. Most of us favor a wealth tax to help bridge the gaping chasm of inequality in our society. The rich do not. Indeed, we hear shrieks of abject horror and cries of doom coming from corporate boardrooms and other defenders of the plutocratic order. It would be comical if they weren't so pathetic. They exclaim that such a tax will destroy entrepreneurial motivation, sap innovation, punish success, and, get this, spur a wave of divorces. The psyches of the rich are so fragile, goes this line of bull, that a tiny tax on people with more than $50 million in wealth would keep them from getting out of bed in the morning. Jamie Dimon, a billionaire Wall Street banker, disingenuously asserts that super wealthy people like him would, quote, be happy to pay more in taxes. But he fears the government will just squander it on giveaways, quote, to interest groups and stuff like that. I have to admit that Jamie does know his stuff. After all, he weaseled billions of dollars from us taxpayers to bail out his bank during the 2007 Wall Street crash. Far from squandering revenues on such welfare cases as Dimon, those supporting the wealth tax specifically call for the money to fund universal access to higher education, free health care for all, restoration and expansion of our national infrastructure, and other direct efforts to restore the common good. This is Jim Hightower saying, to help advance passage of the wealth tax and our nation's democratic ideals, go to Citizens for Tax Justice, www.ctj.org.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I guess new articles of impeachment have been officially drawn up since it seems the cowards in Trump's cabinet are resigning. Billionaire Betsy DeVos has resigned. So has Elaine Chao. She's gone. There have been a bunch of the rats are scurrying, is the bottom line here. Instead of standing and doing what's right, they're fleeing. And this is where I think the Democrats have to bring articles of impeachment, and they have to do it tomorrow. In fact, they should be doing it right now as we speak. And here to share some thoughts on that, and maybe where we go from yesterday's insanity, I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come back and share some thoughts. She's a fantastic reporter over at the wonderful site Raw Story. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with some of the positive. Did you have a good New Year? Good holiday?
I had a fantastic New Year, a fantastic holiday. I learned a lot about the shows that are available on the Game Show Network. And so
yeah, happy COVID Christmas.
This is my COVID life. But most of my folks, and there was food. So what else do you really need?
At least you weren't in D.C. to see all the insanity of yesterday.
Yeah.
Let's start with that. What were your thoughts of what transpired yesterday?
So I knew things were going to get bad, and that's why I didn't go home yet. I don't go home until next week. I think things will be a lot better and a lot safer for the 20th. And it kills me not to be at the inauguration. You know, it's usually a member gets like 1,000 tickets for each office, and this year they get 2. Yeah. One for them, one for somebody else. And it's just like, this is my guy. I don't get to see my guy sworn in, you know, so that's hard. But I think that will be the good thing that comes out of the riots of the 6th, is that the 20th will be safer. Everybody's been talking about how sad they were, how heartbroken they were. I just was so it's kind of like when you see a shooting, you know, when you're covering a shooting, you just sort of like, you just kind of put up this screen of, I just need to work. So, I mean, I came into work 2 hours early and was like, what do I do? What do you need? How do I help?
Yeah.
And that's basically what it's been like for the last, well, we had election day on Tuesday. So I was up all damn night on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, it's just like, I was sitting there watching it anyway. So, it's scary. And I don't understand how it wasn't expected.
Exactly.
That is the thing that pisses me off.
And the thing that gets
more
me
than
is
anything.
I've been expecting this for years. This is
Yeah.
no sane, rational person can look at this crowd and go, this isn't coming. But, you know, as I said today, I spoke with a guy today who was distraught by the fact that this happened. He could not fathom that this could possibly happen with his crowd.
After seeing some of the Tea Party rallies in 2010, I don't know how somebody didn't understand that this was not that far from that.
This was the natural progression.
People came armed to the Oklahoma City Capitol, you know, with long guns, like very, very large weapons at my state capitol, where my candidate at the time, my governor, was working. And I mean, it's scary. That kind of thing really was unnerving. And then you know, 10 years later, you see it take that
Right.
next step. And I'm grateful that we got the resignation from the Capitol Police and the Sergeant at Arms. I think you and I have talked before about the way that the Capitol Police are, and that they are just wretched, and that they shoot first and ask questions later. How that did not happen here is beyond me. I am just shocked as hell that more people didn't die, more people weren't shot. I mean, and everybody said this, you know, if it had been Black Lives Matter, they would have just opened fire.
Right, but
You
let
know,
me ask you
it's
this. Let me ask you this, because as you pointed out, you in your state capital, you had people showing up with long guns. We've had it here in our state capital. All across the country, we've seen these exercises from Charlottesville to Richmond. We've seen these armed, these armed exercises in capitals across the country. To me was the practice to get to this moment. And I got to believe that the Capitol Police saw all of those exercises and didn't fire because they knew chances are they were going to be outgunned.
I think that's entirely possible.
And the fact that they were white faces.
Well, the two things that I heard today that really bothered me and that made me question the judgment of the police chief is the FBI called them and said, do you need us to send people over? And they said no. And the idea that the Martha Raddatz on ABC News said that the National Guard was deployed. It was there. They were directing traffic. So whoever thought that the mass of people walking from Pennsylvania Avenue up to the Capitol was just going to stand there and not do anything, and all they needed to do was direct traffic, like, who thought that was a good idea?
Yeah.
You know, that didn't make any sense.
No, but to be honest, you know, and again, I go back to this conversation I had with this Trump supporter today. He honestly didn't believe that crowd was capable of doing what they did, because he believed that they were them, and he believes that he's a peaceful, law-abiding citizen that was just going to go out and peacefully protest, and that under no circumstances would he even imagined of doing such a thing. And yet here we are.
After we saw what happened with the Proud Boys, you know, after the election, when they just came out to Washington and went over to cause trouble in Black Lives Matter Plaza, right? Like, we knew we knew this was coming. And there have been people telling us for 4 years that he's escalating, like things are getting more violent, things are getting worse. And everybody has been screaming it. And then this happens, and how are people surprised?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
how? I don't understand.
And then all of these kangaroo hearings that they've been having all over the place with Rudy Giuliani and his band of misfits. Basically, this guy today that I talked to, he believes all of it. He believes all of the allegations, all of the debunked myths, and even asking why didn't they bring it into court didn't seem to enter his brain. But here we are. Now I find it interesting that Kayleigh McEnany claimed that the White House actually wants a peaceful transition of power, and it's weird because as you pointed out in your piece, they've been inciting these riots for months.
Yeah. That's the thing. But one of the things so she did this press briefing today. It was maybe 3 minutes long, maybe less. She delivered a statement. She walked off. People were screaming, "How are you leaving?" without answering any questions about this. But her statement was, the White House wants a peaceful transfer of power. We here at the White House would like a peaceful transfer of power, which is complete BS. But then I started thinking, she's not speaking for the president there. She's speaking for the White House. We, as in we, the staff, want a peaceful transfer of power. Maybe that's actually true. Maybe the people in the White House are thinking one thing and the president is thinking something totally different, which would not surprise any of us.
No.
And obviously you're seeing just a huge swath of resignations, from staff, and now obviously the cabinet women.
Cowards.
The cowards. But the thing I wondered, I can see somebody like Elaine Chao wanting to enforce the 25th Amendment. I don't think Betsy DeVos even knows what the 25th Amendment is.
Can she count to 25? Yeah, 25 billion because she's got that much money.
Right. She has so much money, she just has people count it for her.
You'd think somebody would tell her what the 25th Amendment is. No, I mean, with them resigning, to me, that's an act of cowardice and not an act of coming out and saying, we need to do this.
Well, one of the things I wondered is, did they want the 25th Amendment and were they shouted down by everybody else on the cabinet? Because I know, if you go down that list of people, there's no way Pompeo is going to stand up. He is the biggest wuss, on the cabinet. And he's been trying to rewrite history since New Year's. He's been tweeting all of this stuff saying, oh, we did this. And it's just what? He said that Trump pulled out a whole bunch of troops from Afghanistan, after, the two presidents before him didn't do enough to get all of the troops out of Afghanistan. It's dude, Obama pulled a whole lot more than Trump did out of Afghanistan, and y'all put more people in after you came into office. So just little things like that, where he has been making crap up for the last couple of weeks, or for the last week, and it's so infuriating.
Yeah, but every administration does that. They try and put a positive spin on their legacy before they leave.
But I mean, that's the kind of stuff where I'm I just don't think that he is the kind of guy that would enforce the 25th Amendment. And for some reason, I feel like Betsy DeVos might, because what the hell does she have to lose? It's not like she's going to look for another job. She's just going to start another charter school or something, whatever she wants to do. She can go fly around for a couple of months. And, obviously with the COVID, she's got her own private jet, so she can travel the world and be happy, live her best life. And Elaine Chao is the same way, from a super wealthy family. The hell does she care? So they seem like the two people who are the most likely to me to have enforced the 25th.
Because then why did they say something going out the door? Why wasn't this, I'm resigning?
I think so too.
What's that?
That's my question too. I think that's the first question anybody asks either of them. The first reporter that can get to them, you ask, why didn't you fight for the 25th? And I don't know.
So now, do you see some movement out of Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats in the House to move towards impeachment? Or do you see them, deferring to the Colin Powell idea? It's just 13 days. Nothing will happen. It'll be fine. We'll get to the end of it.
Well, what Pelosi and Schumer have said is that they've been calling Mike Pence for the last 24 hours and to tell him, you need to work on the 25th. You need to get people to sign off on the 25th. And they both said today in their press conferences, if you don't, Mike Pence, if you don't start talking about the 25th, then we're going to move forward with impeachment. The articles are drawn up already. I think it's got 100 co-sponsors already. They can have this vote like this. They have they were supposed to gavel out. Everybody was supposed to go home for a couple of weeks. And now Congress is staying, and they're having a Democratic caucus call tomorrow at noon where they're going to talk about impeachment.
We're going to talk about it. You know what? Here's my problem with this. And this, again, is one of the problems I have with the Democrats. At 4 o'clock in the morning, when the vote was certified and Joe Biden was is president-elect, at 4:01 a.m., articles of impeachment should have been introduced, and we should have been moving to get his behind out of there by sunup. It's ridiculous. Oh, we're going to have a phone call. We're going to do this. And then by then, it'll be the 13 days. He needs to be held accountable now. The further we get away from this, the more it's going to calm down, the more the passions are going to calm down, and the more he's going to probably end up staying. Because, as Joe Biden said, he's not interested in that. We're just going to let sleeping dogs lie.
Well, I mean, it doesn't make sense for Joe Biden to be interested in impeachment, because by the time he would get to a place where he could be interested in impeachment, Trump would be gone, and thus it would negate impeachment.
Right.
So it's just
I thought that was a weird thing for him to say as well. But the fact that, this is something that should be happening now.
It absolutely is. And I think I want to wait and see how that call goes tomorrow, because the articles are drawn up. They could bring it to the floor tomorrow. And I think that they should. I mean, I think that's the last thing they need to go moving out of town. They need to pass that and then pass it to the Senate and just be like, your move, Mitch.
Yeah. No, I'm of the mindset that I don't care if he's removed from office at 11:59 on January 20th. It still has to happen. There have to be consequences for what happened yesterday.
I mean, this is the thing. This is a huge insurrection. This is a siege on the U.S. Capitol. Joe Biden called it terrorism. He called it an insurrection. He made it very clear that it's not okay. And so we have to, as a country, as a country of laws, we have to move forward with ensuring that every single person who did this was arrested, arraigned, and gets some time in the clink.
Absolutely.
And Donald Trump gets punished for inciting a riot. We can't just have freaking Facebook and Twitter being the only enforcers, in the country. We have to actually step up and enforce some of these laws. Otherwise, you're going to have another president think that they can do the exact same thing and get off scot-free.
I'm right there with you. To steal another Joe Biden line, this is a BFD. This is a big deal, and it has to be met with the same kind of things. I mean, you look at some of the stories, and you've written a couple on them. The people who were in our Capitol. I guess there was one guy who was arrested with something like 11 Molotov cocktails, who are all ready to start lighting things on fire.
Yeah. And that we haven't heard any information about who. There were supposed to be explosive devices that were left at the RNC and possibly the DNC, and we haven't really heard anything about those. And if they were real, if they were Molotov cocktails from this dude, how many did he make? And I mean, obviously the feds have him in custody. But I just, he's not the only one.
No, when are we going to start seeing perp walks? I think we have to see a march of perp walks. You just march them right down Pennsylvania Avenue like you did, and right into a nice box. Because he's not the only one. There are a bunch of them. I look at the kid from Brooklyn. His father's a Supreme Court justice. I didn't even know Brooklyn had a Supreme Court, but he's a Brooklyn Supreme Court justice in New York. And there he is with a police riot shield, the police chest protector, and just giving interviews. And I'm going, Exhibit A, Your Honor?
Yeah, exactly. There's already been one kid was wearing his name badge for the company he worked for, and somebody screenshotted that and sent it to the company. He's already been fired. But the thing that concerns me the most is that these people were breaking the law, and there were cops literally holding somebody's hand to help them down the steps from after they broke into the Capitol. I mean, I have issues. I have serious issues with what's going on here. And I know that there are going to be 11 billion hearings, in the next 6-8 months that talk about this. And I think that there should be a 9/11 style commission to talk about, what went wrong here.
Yeah, but if you listen to Matt Gaetz, this was Antifa. These weren't Trump supporters. This was Antifa. It was the Black Lives Matter people.
Because now that you're actually starting to see who some of these people are, and actually what's interesting is TMZ, the celebrity, BS rag, created a slideshow of 100 different photos that they screenshotted from videos, from Twitter photos, 100 different people that were in the Capitol that authorities could use to identify who these people are and then find them. The celebrity rag is doing that. That just blows my mind. So, I mean, there are at least, 100 people that we know faces and we can find them and they will be arrested. I think it's been very, the Justice Department and the FBI have seemed like, oh crap, we do actually have to enforce the law on this. But I think, as conservative as Merrick Garland is, he made it seem pretty clear that he's not taking politics into account and is going to enforce the law across the board.
So do you think Merrick Garland, do you think he's going to be the guy who's going to go after these people? Do you think this rises to that? Because my fear is that this becomes, well, we're just going to let this pass. We're going to brush this under the rug. There'll be some people that we'll make examples of. We'll do that, but we're not going to go get the people who organized this thing, the people who funded this thing, the people who opened the doors, and the people at the higher levels who are responsible. They're just going to go with the dupes and the idiots who are stupid enough to go peeing on Pelosi's desk and breaking windows.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with going after both. I do think that the peons and the idiots with the long guns, they need to absolutely be arrested.
Without question.
And thrown in jail. I do think that you should start looking at who the funders were. And maybe this is something I read about, next, is what Republican parties paid to send people here. Because I know for certain donors in Florida paid for one of the guys who died, helped organize a bus of people to come up from Florida. I can't remember if he was the guy who had the heart attack or the other guy. But yeah, there were a lot of people who had their hand in this.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a state senator. We've got a state senator here, Doug Mastriano, the guy who was the ringleader of the pre-Thanksgiving Day political theater show at Rudy Giuliani here in Gettysburg. He was there cheering on the people to the insurrection, the vanguard he used. And there's a call here for him to resign from his state Senate seat, which I'm all in favor of. Every one of these people who funded this, who pushed for it, who called for it, who created the environment for it, have to be purged from our government.
Yeah, there was a newly elected delegate from West Virginia who was there, who did a video. And then I think his either brother or sister made a comment like, yeah, my idiot brother's there, or my idiot brother-in-law is there, something like that, and then posted a picture of him. So there's a screen cap of that. I did a story on that guy. But I think that for any person that was there at that rally who was part of this, regardless of their status or position in office, they got to go.
Yep.
We can't have insurrectionists in a government.
Yeah, and for all those people who were there,
everything.
You're right. And for all those people who were there who took selfies of themselves and ran Facebook videos and then went and tried to delete them, you're going to find out rather quickly that you can't delete them. Someone has them. And Exhibit A, Your Honor. So congratulations, Dum Dum. You busted yourself. And I hope there are a lot of people sharing cells talking about how stupid they were.
Facebook and Twitter work very well with the police and government. They hand over whatever the hell, you ask of them. And especially if there is a very clear violent crime involved. So
yeah, now
it's gonna get interesting for them.
Yeah. Now, There have been reports that it's going to be harder for these folks to get home because evidently, according to Representative Benny Thompson, they've called for an insurrection list and be something to be placed on the no-fly list. So if you flew in, you might not be able to fly back out.
Yeah, I just hope that they get enough of the names of the people by the time they're gone. I don't know if people are going to fly out tomorrow or Saturday. I started looking for flights for this next week, so I have no idea what the flight situation is, because I thought for certain people from Oklahoma didn't drive up. They had to have flown. So I kept thinking, geez, I wonder how many tickets are available. You know, how many people from Oklahoma went who are flying home tomorrow? And so I think if they are going to put these people on the no-fly list, they better hurry.
Yeah. Quick action. And finally, poor Josh Hawley. Had a great book deal, right? Didn't he? He was going to cash in on his stardom. Because again, I've been saying, and you could agree or disagree with me, I've been saying all of the noise that we've been hearing about the election was stolen and all of the kabuki theater that's been going on has been about fundraising, list building, and jockeying for position on who's going to be the next Trump, who's going to stand in front of all the maggot hats and lead them on to the future. And Hawley was one of those guys. He was going to be the front guy. He was leading the charge in the Senate, and he was going to cash in. And now, well, oops.
So, I mean, it made sense for a minute until people started dying. And tonight it was announced that one of the police officers that was attacked by one of the people there died. Somebody grabbed a fire extinguisher, one of the large metal fire extinguishers, and bashed the guy in the head, and now he's dead. So if Josh Hawley wants to take credit for all of these people coming to this rally, for breaking through, the doors and windows to the Capitol and then killing one of the Capitol police officers, and he thinks he's really going to get elected or even nominated from his party, like, he's got another thing coming. And the dude has the gall to get on Twitter and be like, this is a violation of my First Amendment rights. Like, dude, you went to Yale. Come on. Like, you're not entitled to a book deal. Nobody's entitled to force some random publishing company to do their book. Like, if you want to self-publish and stick it on the internet and have a website, then knock yourself out. That is completely up to you. And that's your First Amendment right to do it.
Yeah,
nobody has to pay you for that.
Nobody's stopping you from writing a book. You write all the ones you want and scribble them on toilet paper when we throw you in jail.
Yeah. But what a disgusting human being. What a horrible, horrible person.
Terrible. And I got to be honest, with the death of this police officer, you got to go, what happened to Blue Lives Matter?
Yeah.
And,
so much for that.
What's going to be interesting?
You can see in some of those videos when they knock down that first barrier in the first sort of rush of the Trump people, they start punching police officers. They push the gate down on one of the female police officers. I mean, it was straight up violence, and it was the kind of stuff where it's like, this is Black Lives Matter, they'd be dead.
Yeah. Sad stuff. But it's not going to go anytime soon. If you want to keep up on the greatest information, our good friend Sarah Burris, reporter at Raw Story, does a fantastic job. Make sure you check that out, rawstory.com. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks. I'm sorry it wasn't more optimistic.
Yeah, it started off well. Thanks so much, our good friend Sarah Burris. Again, check out her stuff at rawstory.com / Sarah Burris. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Every day I'm in the United States Senate, I will fight for you. I will fight for your family.
But let me tell you this. There is no doubt that this is already a victory for the ages.
Democrats win majority in U.S. Senate, paving the way for climate legislation. Trump administration, amid attempted coup, auctions off drilling rights in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Plus, Britain achieves new record in offshore wind energy generation.
All of those achievements and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
So showerheads, you take...
Nope, shut up. You're out. You're not welcome here anymore, insurrectionist. This is our Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, do you think we can get through the rest of Donald Trump's term without having to play any more Donald Trump on the Green News Report?
I hope so.
I think you will be richly rewarded if so.
Well, as we go to air in the wake of the shocking, violent insurrection by Donald Trump supporters who attacked and temporarily shut down the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday, there is some normal news, and it's good news for all life on the planet. Democrats appear to have won control of the U.S. Senate majority after the runoff elections in Georgia this week, with Democratic candidates Reverend Raphael Warnock unseating incumbent Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler and Jon Ossoff beating incumbent Republican Senator David Perdue.
That's good news for the entire planet?
Yep. Once confirmed, the Democrats will have a razor-thin margin of just one vote via Democratic Vice President-elect Kamala Harris as tiebreaker. Majorities in both houses of Congress are crucial to reversing Donald Trump's and Republicans' attacks on the environment and public health, and will enable the incoming Biden administration to pass aggressive climate legislation. However, with such a narrow Senate majority, conservative Democratic senators like Joe Manchin of the coal state of West Virginia will hold enormous power. Manchin will be the chair of the key Senate committee responsible for advancing any climate-related legislation.
Oh, my God. Really?
Yep.
And that makes Joe Manchin, if this is important news for the entire world, that makes Joe Manchin the most important man in the entire world.
Meanwhile, the outgoing Trump administration is still in smash and grab mode. In Arizona, the administration will approve a controversial land swap, allowing global mining giant Rio Tinto to develop a copper mine on land held sacred by Native American tribes. And the administration this week auctioned off the first ever oil and gas drilling rights in Alaska's pristine Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, one of Trump's biggest environmental rollbacks and a victory in Republicans' 40-year fight to open up to the fossil fuel industry one of the nation's last remaining wild places.
Yes, please note, that was not just Donald Trump doing crazy Donald Trump things. That was something Republicans have been trying to do for decades to despoil the Alaskan wilderness on behalf of oil companies.
But in a stunning setback on Wednesday, the lease sale was a flop.
What?
Attracting just 3 bidders. And it raised just $14 million, a minuscule fraction of the revenue that Republicans projected as an offset to justify their 2017 tax cut for the rich.
It's as if oil companies don't want to drill for oil anymore for some reason.
Now, of course, the incoming Biden administration can repeal these rules in coming months and years. However, with majorities in both houses of Congress, Democrats can utilize the Congressional Review Act to vote to rescind Trump administration rules, rollbacks, and guidances that were finalized in the last 6 months using a simple majority. No filibuster allowed.
That is huge news. I think it's a law put in place by Republicans who will now be hoisted on their own petard.
In other news, in Michigan, a federal judge has invalidated a key wetlands permit for a proposed open-pit mine in the Upper Peninsula. And in a twist, the state agency that granted the permit 2 years ago said this week it agrees with the judge's ruling. Massachusetts has announced a new mandate that by 2035 it will end the sale of new gasoline-powered vehicles within its borders in order to reduce the state's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions that cause dangerous man-made climate change. Finally, some good news for Britain. Thanks to some gnarly storms over the holidays, Britain generated more than half of its national daily electricity from offshore wind farms for the first time ever. The UK government says the country is headed for, quote, its greenest year on record.
In a dark week, that is a lot of surprisingly bright news. Thank you. For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple, or Google Podcasts. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, after the insurrection, the invasion, the planned, what I've been saying, a planned military-like exercise, you've got 5 people dead, one of them a woman, the first woman who was shot and killed, it turns out was an Air Force veteran. And what's interesting to me is a lot of the people in the crowd were veterans, have served our country. And, there's a lot that goes around that. I'm here to share some thoughts on where we are and why we are here. I've asked our good friend Will Addig to come talk with us. Will is the executive director of the Union Veterans Council. UnionVeterans.org is their website. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I think this is a very difficult time, but it's a time where we'll all have to come together and start working to figure things out.
Now, it's interesting to me that this first woman who was killed, the first bloodshed I've been saying this is the first bloodshed that we've had in this country during a transfer of power during this moment in our country's history. So it's interesting to me that it's a veteran who has fought and defended our country, who swore to uphold and defend the Constitution of these United States, who was killed while invading our house.
Yeah, I think that it's a very, first of all, it's interesting to think about right off the get-go, and it's going to make a lot of people think about veterans and activism and things in a different way. The reality of it is that veterans have been preyed on by extremist organizations for a very long time, for multiple reasons. After World War II, when there wasn't really any kind of treatment or care for veterans that had PTSD, they found gangs and biker gangs, clubs, motorcycle clubs, things like that come together. Many times then being kind of trained and prepped to do more violent things. We saw the same things that happened after Vietnam, where veterans came home and were preyed upon by people that wanted them to do bad things. And we've seen a dramatic uptick over the last 10 years of veterans of the younger generation of veterans being targeted by extremist groups like the Proud Boys, Patriots Prayer, Three Percenters. These groups that are, as we saw today, ready to take up arms against the Constitution of the United States of America and the people who are duly elected through our democracy to represent the American people. It's an unfortunate fact that someone died, but the reality of it is that yesterday our democracy was under attack, and no matter who is attacking our democracy, and especially in a place like the Capitol, where we had people trying to exercise and finish a process of millions of Americans voting to preserve this democracy, there's got to be consequences to be paid. And I will tell you what, I've been in buildings in Iraq that have been run through by an angry mob. I've seen what happens when an election is attempted to be stolen. And no matter if they've got guns or not, when you've got that many people with that much energy and just what happens when a mob like that gets together with a mission, people would have died. And I had a lot of friends in that building. I was watching, we were texting mainly, and the veteran stories woven in and out. We had veterans on the floor of the House, like Jason Crow and Ruben Gallego and Connor Lamb, taking the lead, making sure that their colleagues were safe, being the last ones out of the gate. Jason Crow is an Army Ranger, right? He led soldiers in combat. He made sure he was the last person out of the door. But at the same time, we saw veterans fighting with police the night before and screaming about how they were veterans and that these police didn't represent them anymore. So we're at an inflection point, and I think that's one of the big reasons why the Union Veterans Council does what we do, is that, early on we saw that we need to make sure that we have an outlet for our veterans in the labor movement, and we have some place that they can call home. And I think that's what a lot of progressive veterans, or more progressive-minded veterans, have done with this younger generation. We realize that the traditional angles for veterans haven't worked. And a lot of people always think that every veteran is this crazy patriot that's ready to, take on the government. The reality of most of us aren't. And we saw this in the last election. We saw that the veteran vote swung faster than any other one. It was the military vote swung. It's a generational thing. But the problem is the people that get indoctrinated, that like anybody, when you're indoctrinated and you become you have extremist views, it's hard to stop that.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Will, and this is, maybe I'm painting with a broad brush, and I don't want to do that. But the narrative in this country is that the Republicans are the ones who support the military and Democrats don't. And what's happened, at least over the last 20 years, in my view, is that we've seen the political right, the Republican Party, move further and further to the extreme, and their rhetoric get much more heated, much more radical, to where they're pulling all those people in the military who I know who believe that the Republicans are their supporters in with them. So it just seems like this natural movement to an extremist right-wing kind of governance. And it's what Trump has brought to us. So it's not surprising, but it's what it appears to be. Am I off base? Am I wrong here?
It's what it appears to be, and you're not off base to say that. By no means am I ever going to say that there's more, that we've got more radical progressives than radical right-wing folks in the military. The military does have problems with race issues. They do have problems with supremacy issues, people joining up. We've known this for years. But the reality of it is, this younger generation is the most progressive group of veterans in history. The group before us, that came right before us, a lot of the older men that you see in Congress that didn't go to war after, that came into the military after Vietnam, didn't really go to war. The ones that really brought around this idea of, I think, phony patriotism, where it's all about, not kneeling for, how dare you kneel, but we can take over the Capitol. How big of a flag we can wave, how many flags, piece of clothing we can wear. That really got brought on by I think a group of people who never got to serve their country, and they started living it vicariously through this forever war that we've been in. And it's became, the military culture has become so intertwined with American culture because we've been at war for so long, that we had this fetishization. These folks that are out there, we're watching them. A lot of us vets are on here, talking to each other. They got more gear than we had when we were in Iraq, or they're not wearing it right. They got the complete wrong stuff. But the reality of it is they're using it as a way to intimidate other fellow Americans. Right.
And I would argue, Will, if I could cut you off there for a second, I would argue the reason that the Capitol Police didn't shoot first is because they believed they were probably outgunned.
Well, I think that there was a complete lack of tactical readiness yesterday at the Capitol. And I think that we're going to find out a lot about that. And I don't think that's not an answer that can be just given by one or two failures. There was multiple massive failures into protection of the Capitol yesterday when a known enemy entity was coming to take the Capitol. We knew that the extremists were talking about this. We knew the Proud Boys were talking about this. There was a breakdown somewhere. And the way they contained that crowd, the way they tried to protect it, it was completely off base. But when a building like that gets overrun, when you have hundreds of people, it doesn't take many people to fill those halls. You've been in those halls, I'm sure, once or twice. When you have a mob like that, no matter, there's only so many bullets in a gun. It becomes so frantic. And that's one of the reasons why I'm sure we're going to find out why we found out one of these police officers died. This is the thing. We have been in those buildings. We're coming up on the anniversary. I got arrested a couple of years ago during the government shutdown. I was exercising my rights to petition my government, and I paid the consequences for stepping outside the lines. But there is a difference between that and jumping over barriers. The thing is they did not prepare for us, or not prepare for them. If it had been us, it had been Black Lives Matter. If it had been any labor organization, they would have had that place locked down tight. And that's the part that just is so infuriating to me, to see those people just desecrate the house of democracy like that.
It's infuriating.
Really,
but for me, this wasn't just about the protest. This wasn't just about some broken windows. I actually don't care about that as much as the fact that they went there with the intent to usurp our democracy. They went there with the intent to do something that has historically never happened before in our country, and that's what has me just so beyond myself. But I do want to go back a second to the veterans who are in those crowds and who are listening to that right-wing message. And now this is just my view from the outside. I've never served in the military. I usually defer to people like you who have the ideas in this. But it's my view that for so long we've said, Will, you're a hero. Thank you for your service. You're wonderful. We love you. All this stuff. While you're in uniform, but the second you come back, or the second your family needs something, or you need health care, or you need a job, well, not so much. And what I think, this has created is, people who look at this and say, look, I served my country. I sacrificed, and I'm struggling worse or as much as anybody else. I think the mass inequality we have in the country is the biggest issue that we have.
I think you hit it nail right on the head. And I think this is a broader conversation than the veterans, but one of the things that we find with the veterans communities, we're such a unique group of people. We're very diverse. We come from every walks of life. It's very interesting to when you start looking at the socioeconomics of the veterans community. And that's what the Union Veterans Council is. We are a socioeconomic based organization that tries to make sure that every veteran has, a job, healthcare, to make sure they can live their lives in dignity at least. What we find is a lot of those folks in those crowds are people that are struggling greatly. The highest rate of veteran suicide comes from the group of veterans and service members that have the lowest amount of income and are in the lowest areas of poverty. We have a serious issue. I come from Southern Illinois. It's 7 hours south of Chicago. It is rural America. If I drive a half hour north from Northern Virginia to Maryland, we are in rural Maryland. There is an issue in these communities. We have generations of people growing up without any kind of opportunity. And I believe that's the root of a lot of what we're dealing with right now. And what happens when there's massive wealth inequality and poverty? Well, racist issues come back 10 times harder, because that's what racism is based around, is the idea of being able to say, I'm better than that guy or that girl. I'm better than that class of people or that group of people.
Let me jump in there for a second. Or that's what we're told. That's how we're divided. I mean, throughout this country's history, race has been what's kept us divided. How they've kept us pitted against one another. And the Jay Gould quote, "I can easily pay half the working class to murder the other half." To me, yesterday was live and in action.
I mean, it was. And it's something that's been brewing for a long time. If people didn't see this coming, you've had your head in the sand for the last 4 years. For the last 10 years, this starts every single time you would hear somebody from your hometown say, they got to come get my gun 10 years ago, right?
My cold dead hand.
That is the beginning of it. That is, saying that, I am going to, do something that is illegal or act out against my government. And then there's been this massive attempt to discredit the government, discredit the federal entities, divide us even more that way. But it comes down to a socioeconomic issue in America.
Yep.
It comes to a massive wealth inequality gap, where that people don't have that opportunity to actually thrive in our country anymore. And especially in these communities, and things are changing so fastly. I think these extreme views are the ones that are fueling some of this. And I'm not quite sure if it's going to end anytime soon. I'm very, very afraid for the next few years.
Me too. But here's where my view is. I'm a labor guy. I'm not, I'm unapologetic about that, because I believe most of our problems could be solved by people having good paying union jobs, and having, I'm hoping Joe Biden moves forward on the PRO Act. I'm hoping we have a mass wave of organizing to where people have good family-sustaining wages, healthcare benefits, retirement security, all of the things that I've been fortunate enough to enjoy through my working life, and the ability to support yourself. To me, there's nothing better than having the dignity of knowing that my work supports my family and is rewarded. So I look at, Biden coming in on January 20th, because I'm sure my Trump friends are going to be unhappy, but it's going to happen. Biden's now come out and said that Boston Mayor Marty Walsh is going to be the labor secretary. I think it's a massive improvement over Eugene Scalia. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, just think about yesterday morning. Think about how much work went into yesterday morning, and how happy a large portion of America had to find out that we'd just take back the Senate. We'd retire Mitch McConnell as the majority leader, and we had a bright future. And then this travesty happened yesterday. I mean, people were genuinely happy yesterday for the first time in a long time. But what we have is an opportunity for working class people to have a voice now, in multiple different levels. And this pick with Marty Walsh, I mean, to me, Marty Walsh, he is a worker himself. He has a tremendous story. But what I'm excited about is that I know that he knows about the programs that have put veterans to work, like helmets to hard hats, through the building trades, or the utility workers program, or the many other programs that put veterans to work, to give those jobs, to give them an opportunity, to let them have the American dream they fought for. And I'm excited to start working with him on the DOL vets portion, to really upgrade and update the idea of apprenticeship programs for veterans that have been left behind. So I believe that the working class people are going to have a voice at the highest level of labor in the country. And Marty is going to surprise a lot of people about who he is.
No, I mean, the story that I read, the fact that he and Biden were at the Stop and Shop picket line back when Stop and Shop in the Northeast was on strike, to me is an impressive moment, because I can't imagine Eugene Scalia ever being anywhere near a picket line unless he was there to break it up. So for me, that is a huge, huge move forward. But Will, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Hopefully next time under better conditions.
I mean, Rick, in all reality, that we're in a place that we can work off of. And I want to just say one last thing, is that I want to thank you for all the work you've done over the last 3 years. We met around 3 years ago, and we said we're in this fight, and we're coming out of this fight on the right side of history. And we've got the Senate, we have the House, we have the presidency, and I'm excited to keep working and holding their feet to the fire now to make sure working class people are represented.
Good stuff. Will, I appreciate the time as always. Good to talk to you, my friend.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You as well. Our good friend Will Attic, Executive Director of the Union Veterans Council, unionveterans.org, the website. We'll get links out on how you can check that out. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day that President Jimmy Carter signed into law the Chrysler Corporation Loan Guarantee Act. The act allowed the federal government to guarantee up to $1.5 billion in loans to aid the failing Chrysler Corporation. The car giant had to find private financing for the loans, but had the promise of the federal government's backing. In the late 1970s, high gasoline prices had hit the domestic automobile industry hard. Japanese and European car manufacturers were increasing their market share by producing smaller, more fuel-efficient cars. By 1979, Chrysler's annual losses had soared toward $1 billion. In his remarks on the signing of the law, President Carter said, "It's important to have Chrysler preserved as a viable, competitive entity, not only to protect the jobs involved, but to protect the competitive nature of the American automobile manufacturing industry in its competition with foreign suppliers, and in the provision of good products at a competitive price for the American consumer." Officials from both Chrysler and the United Auto Workers helped to hammer out the deal in Washington. The loans helped save Chrysler, and the company did pay the money back. In 2008, the auto industry companies were once again helped by a federal bailout. Many working people have noted that the federal government seems much more quick to help corporations who fall on hard times rather than regular people. Folk musician Arlo Guthrie wrote a song capturing this very idea.
I am changing my name to Chrysler. I am going down to Washington, D.C. I will tell some power broker what they did. Iacocca will be perfectly acceptable to me. I am changing.
Like what you hear? Check out more at paperhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
A quick shout out to our friend Joe Eastman, who I guess is going to be released from the hospital tomorrow. A little scare for Joe and his family. I guess he had a real bad case of pneumonia. They didn't think he was going to make it. But good on you, Joe, and I wish you the best, man. It's a good way to start off the year knowing that you'll be all right. But here's the thing. I look at where we are in this moment, and as I was talking with Will, I truly believe everything that we're going through can be solved by solving our economic problems, by solving the mass inequality that's been allowed to fester and grow for far too long. This is, as I've been saying, 40 years of supply-side voodoo Reaganomics, married to horrible neoliberal ideas of how the economy works, the Milton Friedman idea, the Chicago school mentality of give the rich people all the money and maybe it'll trickle down to the rest of us, where the only thing that has trickled down to us is hate and division. I've said it before, and the reality is we need to get to a place where everyone has the ability to work hard, play by the rules, and get ahead. That they're going to be able to put a roof over their head, food on the table, have security in health and in retirement. Because after all, we are the wealthiest country in the history of civilization. Still, even after these last couple of years of spending like drunken sailors on enriching our very wealthy. And in fact, thanks to the pandemic, our really wealthy are even really wealthier. So, for me, one of the first things Joe Biden has to do, and this is stuff that should be done now that you have control, a tax rate that's going to tax the wealthy. And as we've had wealthy people on this program, Morris Pearl from Patriotic Millionaires, they've said, look, I've got all I'm ever going to spend. We need to do things better. We need to tax the wealthy and have a massive redistribution of wealth to where it was distributed when we had the most prosperous working class in history, and allow it to truly trickle down. When you've got the obscene corporate profits that we see and the obscene CEO salaries and the obscene amounts of wealth in our heavy 400, there is a problem, America. And just as much as I'm angry and afraid of the mob of crazy people we saw in Washington, D.C., I'm even more afraid of the people who funded them, the people who hide behind the curtain, the people who are the ones who paid for the buses and paid for the Facebook posts and paid the groups to stoke these angers and stoke these fears, to keep us divided and pitted against each other. Those are the people who are really, really responsible for this. Yeah, there were idiots who broke in and did horrible things. Yes, they need to be held accountable. They need to go to jail. We need to lock them up, perp walk them right into prison. But every one of those people who acted to get them there, who organized them, who pushed them forward and pushed them in this, knowing they were going to do it, they need to be held accountable too. I would love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.